everyone. We are live at the McRitchie Hollis Museum. It is our typical Tuesday where we have our lecture series, but we are quarantined right now, so we cannot have our usual big event at the train depot. So we are doing a special lunchtime quarantine lecture series today at the McRitchie Hollis Museum, staying 6 feet apart from each other, so no worries there. But we are streaming to you live today. We're really excited about adjusting and still being able to have educational series even though we are all at our home. So happy to have you join us, happy to have this live. If you see anything that needs to be adjusted, sound or anything, please comment, let us know what's going on. Because we are learning how to do this, and all of us are going through new experiences right now, so let us know and give us feedback on how we can make this better if we do this again. But we're really happy to have Steve Quisenberry here. He is a teacher at Newnan High School, and he also teaches at the University of West Georgia, and he is going to talk to us about a very special Vietnam project that he has been working on, and it's really exciting. I have seen him talk about this project at a Kiwanis event that I went to, and it's really important work that he's doing, talking about narratives and recovering narratives. So we are in for an exciting lecture today. So I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Emily. I'm Steve Quisenberry, and I'm glad you're here if anybody's actually here. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking to Emily for the next 45 minutes, which is fine too, because I'm used to having an audience. And I haven't had one in about a month or so I'm getting a little antsy. All right, but I appreciate you coming and learning a little bit about some of these local guys and the Vietnam War, which I'm very interested in, and I've become very interested in, and hopefully you will be as well. So if you can see the screen behind me, which hopefully you can, I've got the beginning. Okay, for me, as a history teacher, history teachers tend to think on grander scale when they teach students. You know, what's happening internationally, what's happened nationally, what the president do, what the king or queen do, those kind of things. But you know, history is about local people and how they got involved in these bigger events. And I saw this, I began to see it in 2003 when I started a class on the Vietnam War, an advanced elective class on the Vietnam War in 2003 at Newnan High School. And there, the first 10 years or so, I taught that class. I ran into a handful, maybe 6 or 7 people that knew somebody from Coweta County that was killed in the Vietnam War. But it didn't really sink in to what was going on. What changed for me, and this is a class, if you see in the back, I don't know if you can see it very well or not, but in the back is a photograph, framed photograph of every guy from Coweta County that was killed in Vietnam. How that ended up like that started in 2011 when we had a big event here in Coweta County when the traveling wall came to Newnan and Coweta County, which I was heavily involved in. And so if you look at this picture, this is actually on the west side of the courthouse. I ended up, I can't remember if I volunteered or I was asked to try to find the families of the guys that were killed. And this particular plaque on the west side of the courthouse was put up, I think about 1984, 85, shortly after the Vietnam Wall went up in Washington, D.C. And it had a list that I started with when I had to do that research and find family members of these guys that were killed. This picture here is the wall coming through downtown. You may be able to see the courthouse there behind the wall coming through downtown. This is a picture of my class in front of the high school, that the wall drove right in front of the high school. The whole high school came out to watch it come down the road. And then, of course, we had the wall for 3 days out at the fairground. And you can see this was part I was most connected with, was the people, the guys that were killed and their families. And then, just to give you a little idea of how I got involved in this, other than just the wall. For me, the Vietnam class is before the wall and after the wall. Okay, before the wall, it was all big in scope. You know, I did focus on the guys that were there, but not the local guys that died. Now I tracked down the families of all 23 guys that were killed. And the more I did it, the more fascinated I became with the lives that these guys had here in Coweta County. Because the places they lived, I knew where it was, you know? And after a while, I'm starting to think, hey, somebody needs to get these stories down. Somebody needs to talk about these guys. Somebody needs to know something about these guys. There are 23 guys out of 58,000 plus on the wall. And after a while, I said, oh, crap. I guess that's going to have to be me. I'm the one that's made contact with them, with their families. I'm the one that's already got a little outline of the story. I'm the one that's heavily interested in Vietnam and teaches a class of high school students on the Vietnam War. If I don't do it, who will? And so in 2012, I set out on an odyssey, if you want to call it that, of trying to find the stories of these 23 guys from Coweta County that were killed. And the stories are filled with joy and love, but at the same time, tragedy. And I'm not just talking about tragedy that's involved with their death, but other tragedy as well. Okay, so what I would like to do, this next slide shows you a newer plaque down in our Veterans Park with the guys' names on it. I don't know how well you can see it, but these two have been added to that list of names. This is the same list that's on the plaque on the west side of the courthouse, but these two names have been added because of research that I did and found that these guys had connections to Coweta County as well. So what I would like to do is just give you a brief overview on these 23 guys. Okay, some of them will be longer than others. Some of them I was able to find a lot of information, a lot of family, a lot of friends, you know, so I found a lot of information, pictures on them. Others, very difficult to find. In some cases, I've only got one picture of the guy. So it's a variety of things that occurred during the research, and the research is still ongoing. I'm still looking for stuff. After this session, I'm supposed to go pick up some material on one of the guys that a relative from Ohio sent down for me. So I'm still working on this. Okay, so even though it's been 8 years since I started, it's almost like it's never ending. All right, so ones I'm going to be really interested in, of course, is the ones that graduated from Newnan High School, which only a couple of them did graduate from Newnan. Some graduated from East Coweta, the other school in the county that was there in the 1960s. So let's start with Newnan. All right, and so I'm going to split it into guys from Newnan, guys from Sonoy, guys from Grantville, and guys from Palmetto. Okay, the first guy I've got is one that I was very interested in. That's Johnny Calhoun. Johnny moved here, didn't go to high school here, but he moved here when he was a teenager, lived out on Poplar Road, and I've got a bunch of pictures of him because I've really gotten close with his family. There's his mom, Carol, with him as a baby, growing up. And then when Johnny moved here, he lived out on Poplar Road, and he met a young lady that lived out there as well. And she went to East Coweta High School. Her name was Faye. All right, I won't go into the dramatics of their meeting and dating and all that kind of stuff. But obviously, as you can see, they got married. They had a child. Johnny went into the military, wasn't satisfied with the regular infantry experience, and he went into the Green Berets. He went into Special Forces. Okay, and so they lived in Fort Bragg for a while. Then he gets sent to Vietnam. He's not satisfied even then. He was a go-getter. And so he volunteered for a group that was highly secret at the time called the Studies and Observation Group, which was just referred to as SOG, S-O-G. And they did secret missions across the border into Laos and Cambodia in small recon teams. In other words, they recon the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Those of you familiar with the Ho Chi Minh Trail and what that is, they recon the Ho Chi Minh Trail and around the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and then they came back. Very dangerous. Okay, according to what I understand, there isn't anybody that ran those recon missions that wasn't at least wounded. Okay, Johnny's team was discovered. He was the team leader. It was discovered, long story short, they were trying to get to a helicopter. They were being hotly pursued, and Johnny was wounded, and he told the rest of his guys to get to the helicopter. And he, it's almost like when I was a kid in Cowboys and Indians, he held them off while they made their escape. A couple days later, they went back to try to find his body. Couldn't find it. They've still been looking for his body ever since. They've gone back, I've seen the reports, they've gone back multiple times to that area, never been able to find his body. So right now, Johnny Calhoun is still missing in action. And his family will not put up a gravestone or a marker of any sort until they find the remains of Johnny Calhoun. Now, Johnny Calhoun, because of his actions, was awarded the medal, just under the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross. Okay, the second highest medal you could possibly receive. Johnny is also in the Georgia Military Hall of Fame. And this photograph right here, you can see me in the middle at the Hall of Fame induction. I nominated him for the Hall of Fame. This is his mother here and her husband, and that's his widow, Faye. And her, of course, she remarried eventually, and her husband, which is also a Vietnam veteran. Great family, super nice, and very tragic end to a guy that I think would have been a pleasure to meet today. All right, so we start with Johnny Calhoun. There he is on the wall in Washington, D.C. I took that picture, and there he is right here. This is at the state capitol in Georgia, where they list the guys from Georgia that were killed or are missing in action in Southeast Asia. All right, continue with Newnan, second guy that I know a lot about. And you can see that picture. He is a 1964 graduate of Newnan High School. Okay, so he walked the halls where I teach. All right, in the same building, because the building that I teach in is the oldest building on campus, and it was built in the early 1950s. So he walked the halls of that school. And then I had to include this picture with the great convertible Mustang. There he is with his family. So let me stop here and tell you a little bit about Tim Cole. Tim Cole lived out in the Madras area of Coweta, which today Happy Valley Circle and all that. And Tim did what I probably am guessing is the first work-based learning, is what we call it today. His father died when he was a junior at Newnan, and Newnan High School worked it out so that he could work on the farm. They had a dairy farm, so that he could work on the farm, get the chores done, get the cows milked, et cetera, and then come into school about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. Okay, which is exactly work-based learning and what that goes on today. And he graduates from high school, he goes to Georgia Tech, okay, he gets married, and there's his wife, and there's his wedding picture. He gets married, and he joins the military because he feels like it's his duty. And so there he is in the military, and I've got a lot of people know Tim Cole. They used to call him Skip, and a lot of people know him, and I've gotten a lot of pictures of him. These are all pictures of him in the military. Tim went on to become a medevac pilot. Okay, and I love this picture. I don't know how well you can see it, but that's him with his chicken plate on. He's got a carbine and a pistol. He's ready to go on a mission. And he flew over 800 pickups as a medevac pilot before he was shot down and killed. He got the Silver Star. He's in the Medevac Hall of Fame out in Texas, and he's in the Georgia Military Hall of Fame as well for his work. And of all the guys in this 23, he is probably the most well known. There's more people that know him than any of the others. the other 23. And there's his name on the wall. And there's the plaque at the Medevac Hall of Fame out in Texas there. And if you go to Happy Valley Circle today, you'll see part of it's dedicated to Tim Cole, which I certainly think is appropriate. Okay? Now, there's another guy from Madras. His name was Donald Lowry. He's a graduate of Newnan High School as well, class of 1965. And that's a colorized picture of him. There he is in high school. He lived out at Happy Valley Circle as well in the Madras area. He was friends with Skip, Tim Cole, and they played together. And one of the interesting stories about him, one of the most interesting ones I thought, he worked at Colonial Store here in Newnan. Colonial Store, which is a grocery store, used to be over there where the Justice Center is now. Okay, there was a strip shopping mall back there, and he used to work there and as a cashier and stuff like that. And Johnny Wilson told me this story about him. He worked out there at Colonial with Donald Lowry, and he says one day Donald found a $20 bill in the parking lot. Now, you know, this is early 60s, $20 bill. You hit the jackpot, you won the lottery. And Donald turned it in, okay? But the manager told him that if nobody claimed it, he could have it. And Donald told Johnny Wilson that if he got to keep it, he would split it with Johnny. And Johnny said, why would you do that? I didn't find it. He said, because you're my friend. That's the kind of guy Donald Lowry was. The people out at Colonial, the story was that when he left, that he went out, when he left for Vietnam, he went out to Colonial Store and hugged those people and told them goodbye, and that was the last time they ever saw him. Donald Lowry was leading a patrol in Vietnam. He was the point man. He was shot in the neck, and it appears that he was paralyzed. If he lived, he was going to be paralyzed, and he did live for about 2 weeks. But then he died. And the other half of Happy Valley Circle today, appropriately enough, I think, is named for Donald Lowry. All right, so here's some other guys. I'll do a little bit briefer. I spend more time on the Distinguished Service Cross guy and the two guys that graduated from Newnan High School. So Terry Allen. Okay, he liked baseball, he's a sharp dresser, and the girls loved him. Okay, and he was proud to serve his country. That's what his sister told me, that he was proud to serve his country. He went to Central High School, which now is CEC. Central High School was the black high school in the 1960s in this area. And he went into the military, ends up in Vietnam, and tragically was killed by friendly fire. With a mortar round that was short and came in on he and another guy and killed them. J.C. Cofield, that's what they used to call him, Jesse Cofield or J.C. Cofield. He grew up out of Arnco and then into Welcome. They moved over into Welcome, and he is a country boy, okay, straight up country boy. His sister told me that when they grew up, they did not have any indoor plumbing. None. Okay, no bathrooms, no bathtubs, nothing. And if you're a student of mine or Mr. Henderson and are watching this, I don't know that you could possibly imagine that. Okay, he went to Western High School, which is now Western Elementary. He went to Western High School, but didn't stay there long. His favorite class was woodshop. He's just not an academic, which is fine. You know, and he didn't stay there long. He dropped out and was drafted and ended up being killed in the Mekong Delta. His sister still lives out in Arnco, and she has not forgotten. Stephen Pittman, all right, he grew up between Moreland and Grantville, had a rough home life, had a rough family life. His dad wouldn't have anything to do with him, but he primarily grew up with his cousins. And one of the things they shared with me is that he had an unusual taste for cornbread and syrup together, which I never heard of that, and they thought it was hilarious. Okay, but he really liked cornbread and syrup. When he got to be a teenager, he started hanging out with the wrong crowd, but then his life changed when he found religion. He became a Christian, started going to church, and decided that the military could help him. And so he went into the military and was probably going to make a career out of it, and was killed on an attack on the fire base that he was in Vietnam. Robert, or they called him Bobby Webb, another interesting guy. All these I think are very interesting people, but grew up actually in Columbus, and started having some trouble as a teenager. At 17 years old, and this is debatable depending on which family member you talk to, a judge suggested the military might be a good idea for him. Okay, now one of the sisters didn't think that was what happened, but maybe it did, maybe it didn't, because that kind of thing did happen during the 60s. His dad was a World War II vet, so Bobby went into the military, went into the infantry, and did a year's tour in Vietnam. And when he came back, he wasn't ready to get out. He became a recruiter for a while, and then decided if he was going to go back to Vietnam, he didn't want to go back in the infantry. So he applied to aviation school, which is where he ends up. He ends up as a helicopter pilot, and he moved his family to Newnan. They bought property in Newnan, and he was going to try to move his whole family up here to this property. He settled his wife. He had gotten married, settled his wife up here in Newnan, and went to Vietnam and was killed in a helicopter crash. Does not appear to be by enemy action. He got caught in the weather. It's possible that he got vertigo in the weather. We don't really know, except that the helicopter crashed and he was killed. Jerry Smith. Jerry Smith grew up off Franklin Highway. You know, he went to Western as well. He knew J.C. Cofield, and he dropped out as well. The reason he dropped out is because he wanted money to buy a car, which he does buy, a red Chevy Impala in the mid-1960s. He does buy that car, and he ends up getting drafted, of course, and sent to Vietnam, and he got killed by an RPG about 3 months before he was supposed to come home. Mike Watson is another one of these tragic stories. Mike Watson had a rough home life, which I will not get into, but he had a rough home life, got into the military, went into the Marine Corps, and they sent him to Vietnam. But in this case, he is a cook in Vietnam. He works in the kitchen. Holy smoke, that sounds like jackpot. But no, he wasn't happy in the kitchen. Okay, so they wanted him to extend his tour, but he said he would extend if they would make him a door gunner on a helicopter, which is one of the most dangerous jobs that you could have. And they agreed. Okay, then they gave him leave. He comes home. He's going to go to the funeral of Tommy Huddleston, who's the next guy that's going to be popping up here. He goes to Tommy Huddleston's funeral. He gets engaged, and then he heads back to Vietnam. He has a premonition he's not coming home. He gets back to Vietnam, and they don't make him a door gunner. They put him back in the kitchen. Okay, and that is where he dies. A stove exploded and killed him. And this is one of those that I have really struggled with. I thought, it can't be. That cannot be. There's got to have been something that happened. Maybe a mortar came in, a rocket attack on the base camp, a mortar attack on the base camp. Maybe a fire broke out and he was fighting the fire. Something. Has to be something else. But every time I go back to it, it's the same story. A stove exploded and killed him. Tragic. Here's Tommy Huddleston. Interesting character. Okay, on one hand, he's the class clown. He's a great pool player, and they say, and I had several people tell me this, he is a great roller skater. On the other hand, he can kick your rear end in a shot. If you offend him, he will beat the crap out of you. Okay, so there's there's two sides to Tommy Huddleston. He went to high school. He worked at the concrete asphalt company here locally. He lived over by the water tower in Newnan, if you know where that is. And he joins the military, he gets married, they have a child, he joins the military, goes airborne, and ends up in the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And he is killed, if some of you vets that may be watching this, if you're familiar with Hill 875, and the fight on Hill 875, that's where he's killed, running out to try to grab a wounded guy and pull him back into safety. Okay? His family was notified of his death on Thanksgiving Day, 1967. If you can imagine getting that knock on your door on Thanksgiving Day. He is cousins to Johnny Calhoun, the first guy that I did. Okay? Tommy dies in November of 67. Johnny's going to die in March of 1968. So there he is. There's his name on the wall. The next guy, this is one of the guys that I managed to put the pieces together. John Dozier, also rough family life. And he lived in Sharpsburg for a little while. His family moved around a lot, okay? Usually from trailer park to trailer park. And he lived in Sharpsburg for a while. He went into the military thinking it was going to improve his life. And I mean, look at him. He looks like Opie Taylor from Andy Griffith's show. Okay? He thought he was going to get out of the house and it was going to improve his life. And I think he liked it. From everything I can gather, he liked the military. He did a tour in Vietnam and volunteered to go back a second time. 3 weeks into his second tour, he triggered a hand grenade booby trap, tripwire hand grenade booby trap, and it killed him. His family lived in Palmetto when they got the news. Daniel Post, another interesting guy, is the second guy that I got on the wall once I'd established his connection to Newnan and Coweta. Okay, Daniel Post is from the Manger family in Newnan that were big into the cotton growing in this area. And Daniel Post, his parents went to Texas and took him with them. Went to Texas having to do with the cotton business. And he grew up a lot in Texas. But then they sent him to Virginia for high school at a place called Stanton Military Academy. And that's where this picture came from. It's the only picture I've been able to find of Daniel Post. Some very generous lady from the Stanton Military Academy Alumni Association tracked this down in the yearbook for me. And this is the only picture I was able to find. Daniel Post, I found some guys that served with him in Vietnam. He went from Stanton Military Academy into the Marine Corps, and they said he was a natural born leader. He's a natural born leader. The tragedy of Daniel Post is that he died on this day, one day, and the next day he was supposed to head to the rear to get ready to go home. So this was going to be his last patrol, and he triggered a hand grenade booby trap, tripwire hand grenade booby trap, and it killed him. Warner Huey, Emily. Okay. All right, Warner Huey is the next one, and Warner Huey went to Newnan High School for a while. He came from a big family. They struggled a little bit economically, and Warner's interesting story is that for some reason that I've yet to be able to figure out, he left Newnan and went to East Coweta, probably his senior year. And one of the stories that I heard, I've not been able to confirm, is that he didn't actually walk in the graduation ceremony at East Coweta because he had to leave to go to basic training. All right, Warner ends up in Vietnam in 1970, and here's our third guy in a row that triggers a hand grenade, tripwire, booby trap, and was killed. Every time I look at him, I think of like he should be on the beach in California surfing. There's a road, Gordon Road in Newnan, named, dedicated to Warner Huey. Now, let's switch over to Sonoy. 3 guys in Sonoy. The number one guy in Sonoy is Eddie Couch, Eddie Boy. Okay? There's tons of stories on Eddie Couch, but let me just say that if you lived in Sonoy and that part of Coweta County in the mid-1960s, there's no way you didn't know Eddie Couch. He had a charisma. He drew people to him. There's he and his brother when they were little, and there he is in high school. Everybody knew Eddie Boy is what they called him, Eddie Boy. He joins the military at 18. He ends up in the 101st Airborne Division, and he was awarded the Silver Star for actions in combat in the very end of 1968, where he was trying to rescue wounded guys and pull them back to safety. And this is a plaque at the bridge that they dedicated to Eddie Couch in Sonoy. This is the picture, a couple of pictures of the bridge dedication to Eddie Couch in Sonoy. Wayne Vessel, this is one that I don't have a lot of information on. I know that they lived in Texas when he was born. His mom died when he was young. His father was from Georgia, and so they moved back from Texas to Georgia after the mother died, but then they moved around a fair amount here and there. It is what I was told that he grew up for a while in Harrelson, which is a little community in southeastern Coweta, and he may have attended East Coweta High School. Okay, he joined the Marine Corps, as you can see from that picture, and he was killed in I Corps on an operation in I Corps. His girlfriend was pregnant at the time, and his son was born 4 months after he died, and so his son never knew the father. And then the last one from Sonoy is Bill Thomas. Another interesting story. Bill Thomas was at East Coweta a year, maybe a little bit more than a year. His stepdad was in the military and was assigned to Okinawa, so he took the whole family to Okinawa. He was in the Air Force. And Bill wasn't much on school, and he wanted to go into the military, and he wanted to go into the Marines. And so his stepfather signed for him to go in at 17 years old. I did get in touch with some guys that served with Bill. He was 18 years old in Vietnam, and they told me that they knew how young he was, and they were always trying to keep him safe as much as possible. And one of the things that unit had to do was they had to drive the roads to try to keep Viet Cong from booby-trapping the roads, putting a mine in the road, whatever. And so every night they would drive the roads trying to make sure that nobody mined the road during the night. And Bill always wanted to go on these. And he'd always ask them to go, and they'd always say, "No, Bill, it's too dangerous. We'll take care of it." And then the one guy told me that eventually he was really beat one day, he was really tired, and he said, "All right, Bill, you can take my place." And he said, "I heard the explosion." Bill Thomas was killed, and that guy still has a touch of survivor's guilt from what happened that day in Vietnam. All right, so if we go to Grantville, there's 3 guys from Grantville as well. The first one's Grady Elder. Most people haven't heard anything about him. Grady lived in Grantville with his wife, and they had 4 kids. But Grady also joined the military in the late 1950s. So he's not getting in, being drafted and stuff like that during the Vietnam War. He's already been in for a while when the Vietnam War takes place. He's in the 1st Infantry Division when he was killed in a recon platoon trying to take a hill. The tragedy in this story here is Grady Elder's dead, he's buried, now mom's left with 4 kids. And less than a year later, mom's killed in a car accident. And so within a year's time, both parents are dead. And the children are having to be broken up among relatives. At least they didn't go, from my understanding, they went to relatives and didn't go into foster care. So, tragic situation there. Bobby Freeman. Bobby Freeman grew up in Grantville. He was buddies with about 4 or 5 guys that ran together and had fun all the time. And they said Bobby Freeman is a leader, he's not a follower. Okay, so he went to Central High School as well. When he graduated, he got married and joined the military. Okay, Bobby Freeman was killed in a helicopter crash, not a combat helicopter crash, an accidental helicopter crash. I don't have a lot of information on Bobby Freeman, still looking for more on him. And then Larry Pinson. Larry Pinson is another struggle like Mike Watson as to what exactly happened to him. He went to Central High School as well. Some of his friends love him to death. He was guarding a bridge in I Corps, Vietnam, and something happened. And I can't really figure out what it was. I know it was during the monsoon season because the river was really high. It's described as swollen in the military reports. And his cause of death isn't fragmentation, like grenade, RPG, mortar. It's not gunshot, it's drowning. And they couldn't find his body for a while. I don't know if he fell off the bridge, if something happened that caused him to fall off the bridge. Maybe there was an attack, a mortar. I don't know what it was. And it's driven me a little crazy. All right, so I'm still looking for more information on Larry Pinson as well. And then Arthur Hines, the oldest guy, as far as I can tell, one of the oldest guys, Grady Elder and Arthur Hines. Arthur Hines was drafted when he was 26 because he worked for a guy down in Grantville in a print shop. They did printing. They printed stuff for different companies. And Arthur had been doing it for so long that he knew more about it than the owner. He could fix all the machines. And the owner, every time the draft board started coming around to get Arthur, the owner would go to the draft board and said, look, if you take Arthur, I'm going to go out of business. I need him to run my business. And so he kept getting deferred and getting deferred and getting deferred. But 26 years old is the oldest they can draft you. And at the end, they took him. And Arthur Hines was married. He had a twin brother as well. And the twin brother tried to join the military at the same time Arthur was getting his physical, but the twin brother was turned down because he had a heart murmur. And so they sent him home. Arthur was killed on a fire base during the Tet Offensive in early 1968, February of 1968. Now let's go to Palmetto and we'll wrap up the last three guys here. All right, Palmetto's a difficult one. Okay, I was trying to figure out, these guys are on the plaque on the courthouse wall. And I've been trying to figure out why. I thought maybe they lived in the Coweta section of Palmetto, because Palmetto's right on the border between Fulton and Coweta. But I haven't been able to figure it out why they got included in here, in with our guys, So I've included them as our guys, because that's the way they had it back in the mid-1980s. Charles Waltha went to Fairburn High School, and he enjoyed science. He was a tackle, or he was an offensive lineman on the football team. He even it's believed he did a year at college, perhaps Morris Brown is one of the speculations that he was at Morris Brown College. And he joined the military, went airborne, was in the 101st Airborne. He was killed by a mortar shell. Levy Solomon, one of the guys I know less about maybe than any other guy. His nickname was Candy. Don't know why. Okay, even the guys that told me that, I'd say, why did they call him Candy? And they all thought, I don't know. And so another thing, when he went in, he becomes a medic. Okay, and one of the relatives, this is like a cousin, not a close relative, but a cousin, said he believed that Levy Solomon was a conscientious objector and became a medic, which of course did happen during that time. I have no confirmation other than that one statement that he thought he was a conscientious objector. I have no confirmation anywhere on that. But he was killed, stepped on a mine in the road when he was trying to help some civilians, some Vietnamese civilians, which is pretty sad. And the last guy is James Bubba Kerr. His real name is James Clayton Kerr. They called him Bubba at home. They called him Clay in Vietnam. And James is an interesting case. I've got a few extra pictures of him. One of the things that everybody that grew up with him says, he was a great ball player, that he could hit the ball a mile. Everybody I talked to said the same thing about Bubba Kerr. He could hit the ball. And when he's in high school, he's 15, he meets a girl that's 14. Her name's Sheila. And I'm not all that big on love at first sight. I don't really believe in that, but I think in this case maybe it did happen. Okay? They started dating and fell in love, and they dated all the way up until Bubba dropped out of high school at the end of his junior year. And he went ahead and joined the military. She stayed in high school. She stayed in school. And Bubba got sent to Germany. Jackpot. He didn't go, he wasn't sent to Vietnam, but some of his buddies were, and so he volunteered to go to Vietnam. He comes back to Palmetto because they give him leave before they're going to send him to Vietnam. Comes back to Palmetto, marries Sheila, surprises everybody, didn't know he was coming. Marries Sheila, they set up house, and then he goes to Vietnam. Now, Bubba is about 6'1". Sheila is 4'10". So I'm sure they made an interesting couple. Okay, and I've got a picture of Sheila. There's Bubba there, and there's Sheila after Bubba's death right there, in that 60s hairdo. And they met in Hawaii when James had his R&R, which that's what a lot of married couples did, was they met in Hawaii. And she had a premonition that she would never see him again. And 2 to 3 weeks after he got back, he was killed with on a rocket attack on his base, and he was killed. So, why am I doing this? Because those guys should not be forgotten. Granted, nobody's written a big book about them, nobody's made a documentary, nobody's made a movie about their life. There are 23 out of 58,000 guys' names, 58,000 plus names, that all have similar type stories that should be remembered. Okay? I like this quote, never forget where you came from and never take your eyes off where you're going. And so I'm hoping we never forget. These guys have just kind of, I thought, had faded into the background until 2011. Except for their families and a few of their friends that were still alive, most people did not remember anything about them. If you knew them or you've got stories about them, I'm still working on this project and I would love to hear from you. You can email me at Newnan High School. You can email Emily here at the Historical Society, and she will forward it to me, and I will be back in touch. I've got a lot of extra time right now because I'm not working full time. And so I am working on this project quite a bit, and I would love to hear from any of you that knew them or had stories about them. And I want to thank Emily and the Historical Society for having me today. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have too. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us as we tried our first Facebook Live. We will definitely do this again, and we are so excited to have Steve Quisenberry here as our first live lecture. So thank you for joining us. We will see you again. Bye.